everybody. My name is Holly Morin, and I am a marine biologist with the Inner Space Center, as well as a science communicator. And we are located at the University of Rhode Island's Graduate School of Oceanography in Narragansett, Rhode Island, which is clearly where I am not today, thanks to the satellite connectivity of this ship, the Antarctic Research and Supply Vessel, Laurence M. Gould, the satellite connectivity technologies that we have at the Inner Space Center, and the support of the NSF, of National Science Foundation. We're coming to you live from the ship. We're actually out on outside the bridge of the ship where they drive the boat, and we are currently docked at Palmer Station, Antarctica. How fantastic is this that we're connecting with you all in this way? And that's ultimately the goal of this project that we're working on. It's called Antarctic Broadcast, Broader Impacts for Telepresence Technologies, or ABBT, as scientists, we love our acronyms. And what we're doing is using these telepresence technologies that we have at the ISC that we've used to connect with other ships at other at-sea locations all around the globe. And we're seeing if we can use those to do interactions using the capabilities that are already available here on the ship. And the Antarctic region actually provides its own suite of challenges when it comes to satellite communications, snow, wind, wave action out in the Southern Ocean. And then when you're in high latitudes, you actually have a very small angle to work with to connect via satellite. But we're hoping to connect, or we're trying, and we've been doing it really successfully, connecting all of you with the different people that are doing important work and research out on the Southern Ocean, as well as here at Palmer Station. So I like to look at today's broadcast as these are the people in your neighborhood. If we go back to Sesame Street, I don't know, that's what I was thinking of. Who are the people that are really important here at station, that make the science happen, but also do a lot of work to keep the station working and keep it safe, and the environment around here safe as well. So why don't you all, introduce yourselves. I'm going to let the three of you go ahead and introduce yourselves individually. I want you to say who you are and let them know what your role here is on station.
Hi, so my name is Randy Jones. I'm the laboratory supervisor here at Palmer.
And my name is Chris Perry, and I'm the hazardous waste specialist.
My name is Pete McGlaughlin. I'm an emergency medicine physician from Oklahoma City.
Awesome. So thank you so much for those quick intros. What I want to remind all of you back there, wherever you are, I know we have a whole host of schools and groups connecting today, is to remember this is an interactive process. So we want you all to type in your questions. There should be a little box there where you can type in your questions. And we have Jess in studio at the Inner Space Center, and she's watching all those questions for us, and then she'll send them our way. So as you think of questions, type them in, and then we'll get to them in a little bit. So Randy, you're the science manager here on station. And there's something that's been happening at Palmer Station, I want to say since 1991. It's called the Long-Term Ecological Research Project, or an LTER. Could you let everybody know what an LTER is, and then what that is here on station?
Sure. Yeah, so the long-term ecological research projects are actually one of many across the country, the U.S., and also across the world. And they're designed to be these large-scale, whole ecosystem projects that go over the long term. And so that's the one here at Palmer is focused on the polar marine environment.
And there's about 9 or 10 different research groups then that are here at Palmer Station studying the Western Antarctic Peninsula, where this station is located, and then doing other work offshore a little bit as well?
Sure, there's two components. So there's a longer component that's been happening at Palmer throughout the course of the season. So 4, 5, 6 months long. We have 5 groups here, going anywhere from the top of the food web all the way down to the bacteria. And then there's an augmentation of a number of other groups that join a cruise during the month of January. So they have a long cruise in January where there's a whole slew of people that come down and are involved in the project in an intensive period where they go out on a cruise in the area.
Wow. All right.
Along the peninsula. So
then how do you go about managing all of that? Because there's different groups, different requirements. And then I know that different people come in. I know that a lot of the PIs sounds like are coming in, or PI stands for principal investigator when it comes to a science project or research. They're coming in January, maybe right around that cruise. So how do you manage all that, or what is the day-to-day for you?
Yeah, so that's much more than just me. I mean, I'm part of a much larger support group at the Antarctic Support Contract, which is what we're all employed by. And as contractors, we play a role more on the front lines of what's happening. So there is years and many, many hours of time spent preparing for this moment almost. And so the groups that are down here are all really excited at this point, but it's maybe back several years that they've been kind of coming to this point.
Awesome. Alrighty, so I am going to throw it to Jess back in studio and see if she has a question for us.
was out there with you. Let's start with the first question. What is the current temperature and what is the average temperature out there?
Alrighty, so this is our first question, and I don't know if I know what this one is because I've learned to look at the screen before I come out here on the Bridgeway. Do we know what the current temperature is right now, and what's the average temperature here at the station?
I would say the current temperature is probably about 27, 28 degrees.
Yep.
So it's a little bit below freezing, and the wind's probably blowing around high 30s, so like 35 to 40 miles an hour. So it's a little bit windy. You can probably see snow flying around right now. And do you know the average temperature?
Yeah, the annual average is probably like 21, 22, I think, Fahrenheit.
Fahrenheit?
Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty chilly. Do you want to do another question from the studio?
All right, guys, so we have another question from Kobe from Texas. How do you get food from the ocean and prepare it? How do you guys get food at the station?
All right, so this is coming from Kobe in Texas. So this is actually your neck of the woods there. So Kobe wants to know, how do y'all get your food here on station? Where does it come from? What do we eat, or what do you all eat?
I lived in Amarillo for a few years back in high school. So the majority of the food we get is coming from Port Hueneme, California. So for a lot of our goods that get delivered here, it comes on big containers that are loaded in Port Hueneme, and it'll eventually get here. So for instance, yesterday we spent a good part of the day unloading a bunch of frozen food that came in 2 different containers. But a lot of your bulk dry goods will come the same way. But then as far as produce, we do get just stuff from Chile. So when we're in Punta Arenas, which is our port of entry, and we do a 4-day trip here, they'll give us some freshies. You know, it's nice. The freshies wouldn't survive
fresh
from California.
Vegetables. That's what I always like to make sure I clarify.
Yeah, fruit
Not
and vegetables.
freshmen.
It's pretty important down here because that's what we miss from back home.
Yeah. And those are all coming in on this ship, the Gould. That's what this is a supply vessel. So that's kind of its role, is to bring those goods and other things back and forth to you all here. Fantastic. So while you have that microphone, Chris, so we're talking about everything that kind of comes into port, but where you're the has waste supervisor, everything's kind of got to leave. This is a protected area. Anything that's produced as waste can't stay here. So what happens with it? Do you recycle? What's the process?
Yeah, so there's 3 different things we're sending out. So we have the hazardous waste, the recycling, and then just your general landfill waste. And that's, probably the biggest thing we produce. And, we're just talking on the same things you produce in your household, just normal stuff you'd throw in the trash. But, we're recycling plastics and metal, cardboard, paperboard, other mixed paper, some of the metals. And so we actually do a pretty good job with the recycling. It cuts down on the landfill waste a lot. But so the regular landfill waste will leave here and actually just go to a landfill in Chile, in Punta Arenas. All the hazardous waste we'll send back. It'll eventually go back to Port Hueneme. But we let it collect for 2 years because we don't generate a lot of it. And then, in fact, I'm here right now working on the hazardous waste run, is what we call it. And so over the next month and a half, we'll finish loading up that stuff. And, it has to meet all these regulations for like the EPA and DOT. And then it'll all go back to California. And then it goes, some will stay in California. Some might go to Washington, just other places, vendors that kind of bid on taking our hazardous waste and giving us the best price.
Awesome. All right. So another question, Jess, from the studio, from the folks that are out there tuning in today.
Absolutely. So we have a really great question from Jasmine from Louisiana. She wants to know, what, in your opinion, makes your job the hardest?
That's a fantastic question, Jasmine. All right. We will let whoever wants to answer this one. Jasmine would like to know, what in your job makes it the most challenging? What's the hardest?
So as a physician on base, we provide medical care to people and prepare for emergencies. And we also do things like public health water testing, helping with fire drills. And so those are essential parts of station life to make sure that an environment of safety pervades. But those are also things that you don't necessarily train to do in medicine. But it's very interesting. It's very important. And it gives me an understanding of all the important work that everybody does to help support the station mission of science.
Fantastic. Randy, Chris, either of you?
Sure. So I would say that it's definitely challenging to juggle a wide variety of needs, anything from the structural needs of a lab space to the operations to all the science support. And it's not just science that's happening in the labs. I think people should know that there's plenty of science that's happening out in the field.
Yeah.
And right now, you may have seen shots of the ocean condition right now, which is a bit iced over, which is not great for boating right now. But there will be a period for a lot of the season, a lot of the summer season. Here we are in the Southern Hemisphere summer, where there'll be plenty of time for lots of boating. And so kind of coordinating all those different activities play a key role in.
And then the one thing, too, that I think is interesting is that, as both Pete and Randy alluded to, these jugglings of different tasks. Palmer Station is actually the smallest of the U.S. research stations here in Antarctica. There are 3 of them. This one, which is about 45 people max, I think, during the summer. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then you have McMurdo Station. I don't know why I just lost that. And then Amundsen Scott, or I always flip it backwards, but that's right. That's at the geographical South Pole. And those are much bigger stations here. Yeah. So everybody kind of has to, it's this fantastic community that we've been learning about, where everybody chips in to do a little bit of everything so that the station itself can run efficiently. Great question, Jasmine. Let's take another one.
So we have Lynn from St. Helena, New Jersey. We know that you guys all have to work closely together, and she wants to know how many people are currently at the base with you guys.
Alrighty, so this is actually a perfect segue. Fantastic, Lynn. She would like to know how many people are on base right now. Do you guys have an estimate for that?
Mid-30s?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Let's say mid-30s.
About mid-30s.
Yeah.
Mid-30s.
35, let's say.
All right,
33.
35. We'll round it up to we'll keep it nice and I like those numbers when they're easy digits to remember. So Pete, you kind of talked about some of the responsibilities that you have as a physician that aren't usually what you do, but otherwise pretty standard fare here. What's your facility like on station? And what happens maybe if somebody gets hurt? How do we work with that, or how do you work with that?
Right. So part of the challenge is taking care of people where you don't have a lot of backup facilities. Where somebody were to be seriously ill or sick, we would have to send them to South America and then possibly back to North America. There's a very well organized rescue plan for things like that happen. Most of the time we can deal with medical issues here on station. I have a small clinic. It's probably 20 feet by 20 feet, but we have x-rays, we have labs, we have a fairly well-stocked pharmacy, and a lot of supplies. And then the other thing I'd say, and I would say it's really important to stress how important it is that everybody on station pitches in. So we have a medical team that helps respond to medical issues. We have search and rescue teams for the ocean and for the glacier. And with the idea that we all take care of ourselves together, that's a really good system in terms of being able to help people medically.
Awesome. So, all right. So, Jess, I'm going to throw it back to you to take another question.
Thanks, Holly. So a lot of people are very curious about how you guys get to Palmer Station. How do you get there? How long does it take? Tell us about that.
All righty, sure. So apparently there's a lot of questions about how we get here. So how do you get to Palmer Station? Actually, Pete, this is his first season, so maybe you should talk about your first trip here and how long it took and what that experience was like.
Right. So we flew from Denver to the southern tip of South America, to Punta Arenas. And then we got on this ship here, the LM Gould, which when I first got on the LM Gould, it seemed like a big boat. It's, I think, about 230 feet long. And the day we got on the boat, there's a rainbow in the sky. And I thought, this is great. It's going to be a smooth passage. And then we went through the Southern Ocean, which is one of the roughest oceans in the world. And high seas, I think there were 20 to 25 foot waves and 50 knot winds, which is very windy. And what I was most impressed with is that the people on board were launching
XBTs
yep. to measure characteristics of the Southern Ocean during the storm and during the big waves. And I thought,
can't hold up science. No way.
Can't hold up science. And I thought there was a lot of seasickness on board, but despite that, what I would say is it's great to be in a milieu where people really stress that science matters and science is important, and getting that data helps with the mission of the U.S. Antarctic program.
Yeah, and it usually takes about 4 to 5 days, depending on conditions, 4 to 5 days from Punta Arenas to get here to Palmer Station. Now, for both of you that have done this trip multiple times, was that passing through the Southern Ocean? How bad was it?
Well, I would say that it was a little bit rougher passage this time around than usual, but this boat has some peculiarities of how it rides, and it tends to have this motion that's like a
corkscrew
all around, and that can be difficult for people's comfort levels. And
for sure.
It wasn't necessarily that bad of conditions, but it all combined. Like the wave direction, for example, could have been bad.
Yeah, we had a pretty easy go at it compared to these guys. What they tell you is if you do feel like you're going to get rocked out of your bed, you can put your life preservers and tip your mattress so you wedge against the wall. Yeah. So I did that only for one night. Actually, what prevented us from coming into station was you had some pretty significant winds. I think you were up to 100 knots maybe. It was pretty windy, so we were actually blessed with having to hang out in the Nuremberg Channel for about a day, which was a beautiful protected area. It was super gorgeous. We had penguins swimming all around us, and it wasn't a bad place to kind of get stuck. So let's go back to another question there from you in studio, Jess.
Wow, 100 knots. That must have been wild to experience that. I guess it's a rite of passage, right? Get some rough seas when you're traveling on a ship. We have 6th grader Nate from Sunderland Elementary. He's wondering, what do you guys do for fun when you're not working?
Oh, what a great question. So Nate would like to know, what do you all do for fun when you're not working?
Well, we have this nice glacier right behind us, and we can go out and go skiing or snowshoeing, or you just want to go for a walkabout. We have what we call the backyard. So the glacier is about half a mile away, and you have this area in the summer. It'll be kind of rocky. Right now, it's the backyard is a fun place just to snowshoe or ski. But yeah, you can get your downhill skiing going on, practice your telemark turns. Good place for it. It's not a huge area, but it's fun. And,
what else? So what else besides getting outside? I know there was a pretty heavy-duty marbles game that was happening when I first came on station.
There's the first annual Antarctic Marbles Championship that's going to happen. There's an ongoing cribbage championship. There's some fairly competitive card games happen. And yeah.
Guys.
So folks like to hang out in the lounge area, and there's TV shows they'll be watching. They'll just schedule people put up for what might be going on that certain nights. And when we do have open water and the conditions are right, we will be able to go out after hours, off work hours, and do recreational boating. So that's a really fun way to see the area.
And also see the animals. That's one thing to think of, is that this is a really special station, that they have a lot of wildlife. The humpback whales will actually come into this harbor area or just offshore. And then they have all the penguins, the seals. It's really, and all the seabirds, other seabirds, really special. Great question. Another one, Jess.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mrs. King's class from Robinsonville, New Jersey, want to know, how long do you guys stay in Antarctica for?
Oh, what a great question. So Mrs. King's class would like to know, how long do you all stay in Antarctica for? You and I were just talking about this actually before we came on camera.
Yeah. So we are all contractors, and we're all typically here for about 6 months. So it's typically here at Palmer, the schedule typically is late September, early October, we arrive, and then we'll depart in early April. And there's other stations, a little different. McMurdo, for example, is come in August and then leave in February. Their schedule's a little shifted based on logistics.
Great. And then what do you guys, out of curiosity, so if you're 6 months on, 6 months off, what do you do then with your 6 months off?
Just lay on the couch. Wait for the next. Well, I'm in Alaska, and I'm a little town, and it's actually very seasonal work there. Okay. But the odd thing is, I just finished the winter, and I'm sticking around for this hash run. And by the time I get home, I'm here a little bit longer. Yeah. And when I get home, there's really no work where I'm at. So, but there's odd jobs, or I'll work on my house, or I'll cut wood. But for, I don't know, where he lives, there's probably
I'm,
clinic that needs it, right?
I'm going to go home and wait for the snot in my nose to unfreeze.
There you go.
Now, I work in a big city emergency room, and so I'll go back to work in the emergency room. And this is a really nice break where we have access to services through university relationships in the United States. But it's a great combination to work in a big emergency room and then be able to come down here and provide community care.
Great. All righty. So another question, Jess.
A lot of work there, and we have some people asking, what is the science that scientists are primarily studying at Palmer? What are all the different areas you guys are studying?
All right, Randy. So what are all the different science areas that are being studied here at Palmer?
So the majority of our science projects are marine science, as sort of your background seems to be pointing to, and also oceanography. But we also should acknowledge that there is quite a bit of the projects, over half, that are supported by our research associate, and they're up the hill in what we call the Terra Lab building.
Yep.
And Marissa is our research associate this year. Yep. She supports around 12 projects, and these are things in meteorology, geology, and other areas that might be something that an instrument can be installed, and then she can support it remote. She can be the support for the remote researchers long term.
Yeah, and then as Randy alluded to, when you're talking about the marine science or the oceanography components, they're kind of working their way up from the very teeny tiny and bottom of the food chain all the way up to the top predators, so the penguins, seabirds, seals, etc., that are here in the area, and then looking at all the different components, the chemistry, the other physical components where water masses are. Yeah, you have divers that go out here too?
We've had divers. We have divers coming down this season as well that will be doing work collecting algae and little amphipods or little things that grow on these algae, bringing them back to the labs and doing a pretty intensive work on looking at kind of ocean acidification effects on those creatures in the aquarium room.
Oh, really interesting.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
but it's a pretty wide variety.
Yeah, well, that's great though. And they all kind of intersect. That's what I think is so fascinating about these LTERs, that there's so many components, but then they all complement each other and can help actually support and share data.
Quite a bit of collaboration, actually. So not planned collaboration is something that commonly will happen down here, where there's groups that didn't plan actually to be quite involved, and they'll get themselves collaborating, and it's really kind of neat to see how it all shakes out.
Especially when it's organic like that, yeah.
So one really interesting thing for those of us that are not actively doing science is that every Tuesday evening they'll have a science talk, and they'll get one of the scientists to talk about their research.
That's great.
Krill was the last one, about the different sizes of krill and what krill eat to grow, and whether they need a high protein or a high fat diet. And for non-scientists to be among scientists actively doing research is really stimulating.
Awesome. All right. So one last question. We have time for one last question, Jess.
Thanks, Holly. So this final question, we're talking about, you guys are mentioning phytoplankton. We know they're the primary producers of Antarctica. Harrison Albright wants to know from North Oldman High School, are there terrestrial producers, or is it just the phytoplankton?
Alrighty, so you mentioned the algae, you mentioned the plankton, which we know are the phytoplankton or the marine producer. Are there any terrestrial producers? So I think that might be, if I can interpret that right, are there any plants and trees here in Antarctica?
Yeah, unlike the northerly latitude equivalent to us, like Fairbanks, Alaska, which does have trees, we have two vascular plant species, so two small, essentially grasses. And that's about it. We do have a lot of different lichens, and there are mosses. Actually, moss beds would be the most visible thing you would see on the island sometimes, are these very deep moss beds, which, if you think about it, they're actually sort of like a history, because there's the most recent growth layers on top down to the oldest at the bottom. So actually, we had a science group last year on station, and then this year on the boat, that had focused on coring and researching those moss beds to understand changes that those moss beds can tell them about, things like when it was glaciated last or when it was covered in the glacier.
Fantastic. What a
Yeah.
great question to end on.
And
That was
I
super
found
super
some
excellent.
mushrooms here too.
Really?
Believe it
You
or not.
found mushrooms.
Yeah.
Wow. Awesome.
I mean, like natural. Not
Yeah, no,
growing
you're
into
good.
produce.
You're good.
Yeah.
Yep. So, alrighty. So on that note, thank you so much today, everybody, for joining us. You had such great questions. We really appreciate it. And hopefully you've learned a little bit about Antarctica, about Palmer Station, the program here that's been supported by NSF since the 1950s. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Remember to follow along with the Inner Space Center on social media, so Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But otherwise, from the penguins, the leopard seals, the sheathbills, the elephant seals across the way, Rumpelstiltskin, all the animals that are here at the station.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much, and have a great day. I'm not going to be able to get back up. Give us a big wave. Okay, we can stop moving. Oh my god, feel push.